There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you slept last night. It is the exhaustion of someone who has been fighting the same battles, making the same mistakes, arriving at the same dead ends, and cannot understand why, despite their effort, despite their sincerity, despite how badly they want things to be different, the world keeps winning. You are not lazy. You are not unintelligent. You are not cursed. You are habituated. And there is a difference between those things that will change everything once you understand it. A curse is something done to you from the outside. Something you cannot control, cannot address, cannot dismantle with your own hands. A habit is something built from the inside. Quietly. Incrementally. Often with the best intentions. Often in the name of survival, or comfort, or simply because it was the only available response to a situation that no longer exists, but the response kept going long after the situation ended. And habits, unlike curses, can be killed. Not easily. Not painlessly. Not without the kind of honest self-confrontation that most people spend their entire lives engineering elaborate systems to avoid. But they can be killed. And when they are, when you do the difficult, courageous, life-altering work of identifying and dismantling the specific habits that have been quietly collaborating with the world to break you, everything changes. Not someday. Not gradually and imperceptibly over decades. Everything. And faster than you think possible. This is that conversation. Stay with me. The habit of waiting for the right moment. Let's begin here. Because this habit is so common, so widely shared, so socially acceptable, that most people have never once questioned whether it is costing them anything. It is costing them everything. The right moment is a myth. A comfortable, convincing, endlessly renewable myth, because the conditions required to make a moment feel right are always just slightly beyond what is currently available. More money. More time. More certainty. More confidence. More clarity. More of whatever the specific flavor of not yet looks like in your particular life. There was a man named Raymond who had carried a business idea in his chest for 11 years. 11 years of almost. 11 years of when the timing is better. 11 years of watching other people build inferior versions of his idea and wondering how they had the audacity to begin without being ready. They began because they understood something Raymond hadn't yet accepted. You do not begin when you are ready. You become ready by beginning. The brain, this extraordinary, adaptive, pattern-hungry organ you carry everywhere, does not build confidence in advance of action. It builds confidence as a response to action. Every time you do the thing before you feel ready, your brain updates its model of what you are capable of. Every time you wait until you feel ready, your brain confirms its current model, which is the model of someone who has not yet done the thing. Readiness is not a precondition. It is a result. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote something that belongs on the wall of every person who has ever said "I'll start when." While we are postponing, life speeds by. Not crawls. Not drifts. Speeds. With the indifference of something that has no obligation to wait for your comfort. Kill the habit of waiting. Not by becoming reckless, discernment is not the enemy here. But by understanding that imperfect action taken today builds more than perfect plans harbored indefinitely. The world will keep breaking the person who is always almost ready. Begin. The habit of consuming without creating. This one will land differently depending on where you are in your life. But I want you to hear it regardless, because it is one of the quietest and most devastating habits of the modern age. We are living in the most content-rich environment in human history. More information, more entertainment, more perspectives, more stories, more everything, available instantly, frictionlessly, endlessly, than any human being who came before us could have imagined. And it is making enormous numbers of people deeply, inexplicably, persistently unfulfilled. Not because consuming is bad. Consumption, of ideas, of art, of philosophy, of stories that expand your understanding of what it means to be human, is one of the great gifts of being alive. But there is a ratio. And when the ratio collapses entirely in the direction of consumption, when you are taking in constantly and producing nothing, something inside you begins to atrophy. Because you were not built only to receive. You were built to make. To contribute. To take what you have absorbed and transform it, through the alchemy of your unique perspective and experience and voice, into something that did not exist before you made it. A woman named Patience spent 3 years consuming content about the novel she wanted to write. Podcasts about the writing process. YouTube videos about plot structure. Books about character development. Courses about the publishing industry. She knew more about writing than most published authors. She had written 11 pages. The consuming had become a substitute for the creating, because consuming felt productive without carrying the vulnerability and the discomfort and the very real possibility of failure that creating requires. This is the trap. And it is a sophisticated one, because it wears the costume of preparation. But preparation that never converts to production is just consumption with better branding. The world does not reward the person who knows the most. It rewards the person who builds with what they know. Who ships. Who puts something real into the world and then puts something else and then something else, until the compounding of their output produces results that no amount of consuming could ever have generated. Examine your ratio. Honestly. Without defense. And then shift it. Even slightly. Even imperfectly. Even if what you create is rough and uncertain and nothing like what you envisioned. Create something today. With what you already have. From where you already are. The world keeps breaking the person who is always preparing to begin. The habit of outsourcing your self-worth. Of all the habits on this list, this is the one that operates at the deepest level. The one whose roots reach furthest down into the architecture of who you believe yourself to be. And it is the one that, once addressed with real honesty, produces the most dramatic shift in how you move through the world. Self-worth outsourcing is the habit of locating the evidence for your value outside of yourself. In other people's opinions. In professional achievements. In the number on the scale or the balance in the account or the response to the post or the way someone looked at you, or didn't look at you, across a room. It is the habit of waking up every morning and, before you have done a single thing, checking the external environment to find out how you should feel about yourself today. And the devastating thing about this habit is how completely it puts your entire inner life at the mercy of forces that have no idea they are holding it, and would not necessarily be careful with it if they did. There was a man named Elias who was extraordinary at his work. Genuinely, objectively, by every measurable standard, exceptional. His colleagues respected him. His clients sought him specifically. His output spoke clearly for itself. And yet Elias began every morning in a state of quiet anxiety, waiting. For the email that confirmed he had done well. For the meeting where the numbers were praised. For the specific person whose approval carried, for reasons Elias had never fully examined, more weight than everyone else's combined. On the days the confirmation came, Elias was fine. Productive. Warm. Present. On the days it didn't, a cloud settled over everything. Not dramatically. Just a persistent, low-grade dimming that affected his concentration, his relationships, his sleep, his sense of the future. Elias was not lacking confidence. He was lacking something more fundamental. He was lacking an internal reference point for his own value. The Stoics were relentless on this. Epictetus, a man who owned nothing, controlled nothing externally, had been literally owned by another human being, built a life of such profound inner freedom that people traveled from across the ancient world to sit at his feet and learn from him. Because he had located his worth in the one place it could never be taken from. Inside himself. In his character. In his values. In the quality of his attention and his honesty and his response to whatever circumstances placed themselves in front of him. Not in anyone's opinion of those things. In the things themselves. This is the work. The daily, patient, countercultural work of building an internal reference point so solid, so honest, so grounded in genuine self-knowledge, that what other people think becomes interesting rather than essential. Relevant data, perhaps. But not the verdict. You are not the opinion. You are not the achievement. You are not the response to the post. You are the quality of who you are when no one is watching and nothing is at stake. Build your worth there. Tend it there. Protect it there. And watch how differently the world's brakes land when they can no longer reach the place where your sense of self actually lives. The habit of making permanent decisions from temporary emotions. The world breaks the person who decides from the storm. And we have all done it. In a moment of anger, sent the message that dismantled a relationship built over years. In a moment of fear, walked away from the opportunity that could have changed everything. In a moment of overwhelm, abandoned the project that was 3 weeks from a breakthrough. In a moment of rejection, concluded something final and sweeping about our own worth or our own future. Emotions are real. They are valid. They carry information, often crucial information, about what matters to us, what has been violated, what needs attention. But they are not built for decision-making. Particularly not for permanent decision-making. The emotional brain, the limbic system, in neurological terms, is ancient. It evolved to keep you alive in immediate, physical, life-or-death situations. It is fast, reactive, and magnificently designed for the kind of world our ancestors inhabited, where threats were physical, immediate, and required instant response. It is not designed for the complex, nuanced, long-consequence decisions of modern life. And yet we hand those decisions to it constantly. A woman named Mirabelle had spent 4 years building a small business. It was not yet profitable, not quite, but it was close. The trajectory was clear to anyone who examined it with any patience. 3 weeks before what would have been her first genuinely profitable month, she had a terrible day. Everything that could go wrong did. A client cancelled. A supplier failed her. A piece of equipment broke in a way that felt, in that moment, like a metaphor for the entire enterprise. She made a decision that evening. From that storm. Swiftly and completely. She closed the business. Not because the business was failing. Because she was overwhelmed. And in that overwhelm, her ancient, reactive, survival-oriented emotional brain concluded that the fastest way to end the pain of the storm was to end the thing causing the storm. She found out 3 months later, when a former client called asking where she had gone, that the month she had abandoned would have been her best yet. The habit to kill is not feeling the emotion. Feel it. Fully and honestly. The habit to kill is deciding from it. Marcus Aurelius, governing the most powerful empire on earth, surrounded by constant crisis and pressure, practiced what he called delaying the response. When something provoked him, he would feel it, note it, and then deliberately wait before acting. Not from weakness. From wisdom. From the understanding that the person who acts from the height of an emotion is not the same person who will live with the consequences of that action. When the storm comes, and it will come, feel it. Name it. Honor what it is telling you. And then wait. Wait until the weather settles and the person who makes the decision is the person who will live with it. That person makes better choices. Every time. The habit of chronic comparison. There is a thief that has been operating in your life for so long that you have probably stopped noticing it is stealing from you. It moves quietly. It never announces itself. It simply appears, in the scroll, in the conversation, in the glance across the room at someone else's life, and takes something you cannot immediately put a name to. It takes your enough. Chronic comparison is the habit of measuring the value and progress of your life against the visible highlight reels of other people's lives, and consistently concluding, from that deeply flawed comparison, that you are behind. That you are less. That something about where you are is insufficient relative to where they appear to be. And I want to be precise about why this habit is so particularly destructive. It is not just that it makes you feel bad. Feeling bad, temporarily and productively, can be a powerful motivator. It is that it misdirects you. Because when you are running a race towards someone else's destination, optimizing your life for the achievement of their version of success, their visible markers of arrival, their highlight reel benchmarks, you are not building your life. You are building a pale, second-hand, fundamentally unsatisfying imitation of someone else's. A man named Oscar spent 7 years in quiet misery that he could not fully explain. He had achieved, by any objective standard, a great deal. A career others envied. A home others admired. A life that, from the outside, looked like success. But Oscar had built every piece of it with one eye on someone else. A friend from university whose trajectory had become, without Oscar ever consciously deciding this, the benchmark against which Oscar measured every one of his own moves. He didn't want his friend's life. He had never actually examined whether he wanted his own. He had been too busy comparing to ask. The Stoics offered a remedy that is as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. They called it returning to your own lane. The understanding that your life has a specific direction, a specific purpose, a specific set of gifts and constraints and circumstances that make it entirely incomparable to any other life. Not better. Not worse. Incomparable. Because comparison requires a common standard. And there is no common standard for lives as particular, as specific, as unrepeatable as human lives are. Kill the comparison. Not by becoming blind to other people's achievements, let those inspire you, inform you, expand your sense of what is possible. But kill the verdict. Kill the conclusion that their progress says anything definitive about yours. Your life is not a competition with anyone else's. It is a conversation with your own potential. Have that conversation. Fully. Without the noise of anyone else's answers drowning out your own questions. We are halfway through this conversation, and I want you to feel something right now. Not just informed. Seen. Because the habits we have covered in this first part are not the habits of weak people or broken people or people who have somehow failed at being human. They are the habits of people who are doing their absolute best with the understanding they currently have. People who are trying, sincerely, earnestly, with real effort, and finding that the effort alone is not producing the results they need. Because effort applied in the wrong direction is not enough. Direction matters. The habits underneath the effort matter. And naming them, honestly, without self-punishment, with the clear eyes of someone who is done being comfortable in patterns that are keeping them small, is the first and most essential step toward killing them. There is something that happens to a person who has been broken by the same thing enough times. They stop calling it breaking. They start calling it life. They build their entire philosophy of existence around the assumption that this is simply how things are. That the struggle is permanent. That the ceiling is real. That the gap between where they are and where they want to be is not a problem to be solved but a condition to be endured. And the tragedy, the real, profound, unnecessary tragedy, is that the ceiling is not made of circumstance. It is made of habit. Habits so familiar they have become invisible. Patterns so deeply grooved into the daily architecture of how they think, respond, decide, and move, that they no longer experience them as choices. They experience them as personality. But personality is not fixed. Identity is not a sentence. And the habits that have been collaborating with the world to break you are not permanent features of who you are. They are decisions. Made so many times they stopped feeling like decisions. And decisions can be unmade. Let's finish this. The habit of avoiding difficult conversations. There is a particular kind of person who is universally liked, warm, agreeable, easy to be around, never the source of tension or discomfort, and who is quietly, systematically, destroying the quality of their own life. Not through malice. Through avoidance. The difficult conversation is one of the most powerful tools available to a human being navigating relationships, work, and the general complexity of sharing the world with other people. It is the instrument through which misunderstandings get resolved before they calcify into resentments. through which needs get expressed before they become demands, through which boundaries get established before their absence becomes an invitation. And most people will do almost anything to avoid having it. A woman named Veronica had a business partner she had been quietly miserable alongside for 2 years. The imbalance in their arrangement was clear, to Veronica, to their mutual colleagues, to anyone who spent more than an hour observing how they operated together. Veronica was carrying more than her share, producing more, sacrificing more, and receiving, in return, exactly half the credit and exactly half the compensation. But Veronica did not have the conversation. Because the conversation was uncomfortable. Because her partner was sensitive. Because the friendship predated the business and she didn't want to damage it. Because she kept hoping, with the particular, exhausting hope of someone who is avoiding the truth, that the imbalance would correct itself without anyone having to say anything. It did not correct itself. It compounded. And at the end of 2 years, Veronica did not have a difficult conversation. She had a dissolution. Of the business, of the friendship, of 2 years of her life spent in a dynamic that a single honest exchange, 18 months earlier, might have corrected entirely. This is what avoidance costs. Not the discomfort of the moment. The compounded interest on a debt that keeps growing because you keep refusing to address the principle. The Stoics spoke of parrhesia, frank, fearless, honest speech. The courage to say the true thing to the person who needs to hear it, in service of genuine relationship and genuine resolution. Not cruelty. Not aggression. But the dignified, grounded, respectful delivery of what is actually true. It is a courage that can be developed. That must be developed. Because the world will keep breaking the person who is fluent in every language except the language of their own honest truth. Have the conversation. Not when you are ready, because that moment rarely comes. But when the cost of not having it has become greater than the discomfort of having it. That moment, for most people, arrived a long time ago. The habit of treating rest as a reward. Somewhere in the culture, embedded so deeply that most people have never once questioned it, is a belief that rest must be earned. That you are only entitled to stillness after the work is done. To peace after the productivity is proven. To recovery after the output has been sufficient to justify the pause. And since the work is never entirely done, since there is always more that could be produced, more that could be improved, more that could be optimized, the rest never quite arrives. Or it arrives so laden with guilt and restlessness and the background hum of everything still undone that it does not actually restore anything. This is not discipline. This is a misunderstanding of how human performance actually works. The brain does not operate like a machine that runs until it breaks and then gets fixed and runs again. It operates like a living system, one that requires cycles of exertion and recovery, of deep focus and genuine rest, of output and restoration, to sustain the level of performance that ambitious, purposeful lives require. A surgeon named Kwame had a reputation for being the most precise and clear-headed in his department. His colleagues noticed, and occasionally resented, that he seemed to operate at a consistently high level while they burned bright and then crashed in predictable cycles. They assumed it was talent. It was schedule. Kwame treated his rest with the same non-negotiable seriousness that he treated his operating hours. Sleep was not flexible. His one full day away from the hospital each week was not cancelled for non-emergencies. His evenings had a point at which work ended and genuine restoration began. Not because he was lazy. Because he understood something about performance that his exhausted colleagues had not yet accepted. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. And a vessel that is never refilled does not gradually become less full. It cracks. Seneca wrote, "Give yourself a period of relaxation." Not as indulgence. As strategy. As the deliberate, intelligent management of the only instrument through which everything you want to build will be built. Rest is not the reward for good work. Rest is the condition that makes good work possible. Kill the guilt. Schedule the recovery. Treat your restoration with the same respect you give your ambition. Because the world will keep breaking the person who runs their engine without ever checking the oil. The habit of living in reaction. Most people are not living their lives. They are responding to them. There is a profound difference between those two things, and it is the difference between a person who feels like the author of their existence and a person who feels, despite all their effort and intelligence and genuine desire for something better, like a passenger. Living reactively means waking up and immediately allowing the external environment to set the agenda. The phone checked before the first conscious thought has fully formed. The news absorbed before the day's intention has been established. The emails answered, the messages responded to, the demands of everyone else's priorities addressed, before a single minute has been given to the question of what you actually intend for this day. And then, at the end of that day, the familiar, sourceless dissatisfaction of someone who was busy from morning to night and yet somehow feels like nothing that truly mattered got done. Because nothing that truly mattered to you got done. Everything that got done mattered to someone else. A man named Dominic made a single change to his daily routine that he described, 18 months later, as the most significant decision of his professional life. He stopped checking his phone for the first hour of every morning. That was it. 1 hour. 60 minutes of not allowing the external world to set the frequency of his mind before he had set it himself. He used those 60 minutes differently depending on the day, sometimes writing, sometimes reading, sometimes simply thinking about what he actually wanted to accomplish and why. The results were not subtle. Within 3 months, Dominic had made more genuine progress on his most important long-term project than he had in the previous 2 years of reactive, externally driven working. Not because he had more time. Because for the first time, the first and best energy of his day was going to what mattered most to him, rather than to whatever happened to arrive in his inbox first. Marcus Aurelius began every morning with what he called a preparation, a deliberate, internal setting of his values, his intentions, his philosophical orientation, before engaging with the world. The Emperor of Rome. The most externally demanded upon person in the ancient world. And he began every day by going inward first. Because he understood that a person who does not set their own agenda will always be living out someone else's. Kill the reactive habit. Not by becoming unresponsive or unavailable to the legitimate demands of your life. But by establishing, every single day, before the world gets its hands on you, what your day is actually for. Who you are. What matters. What you are building. And then let everything else fit around that. The world will keep breaking the person who wakes up and immediately hands the day to whoever got there first. The habit of rehearsing worst cases without executing best responses. The human mind has a negativity bias that is, in evolutionary terms, completely rational. For the vast majority of human history, the person who anticipated the worst was the person who survived. The rustle in the grass that might be a predator. The unfamiliar face that might mean danger. The coming winter that required preparation now, regardless of how warm today felt. That bias kept our ancestors alive. In modern life, where most of the threats we face are social, financial, and professional rather than physical and immediately lethal, it has become one of the most exhausting and limiting features of the human cognitive experience. Because the mind that rehearses worst cases obsessively, that runs through every possible way the thing could go wrong, every humiliation that might result, every loss that might follow, without pairing that rehearsal with an equally disciplined preparation of the best possible response, is not protecting itself. It is imprisoning itself. There is a distinction the Stoics made that I want to give you, because it is one of the most practically useful ideas in the entire philosophical tradition. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. And it is often misunderstood as a practice of pessimism. It is not. It is a practice of preparation. The Stoic does not rehearse the worst case in order to be paralyzed by it. They rehearse it in order to ask, calmly, rationally, from a place of philosophical stability rather than anxious spiral, and if that happens, what will I do? The rehearsal always ends with the response. Not with the catastrophe. A woman named Adise had spent years in a state of productive paralysis, knowing what she wanted, seeing the path clearly, but unable to take the first step because her mind kept delivering vivid, detailed, emotionally convincing previews of every conceivable failure. A mentor gave her a practice. Every time the worst case appeared, and she was not to suppress it, not to deny it, not to paste positive thinking over it, she was to follow it, immediately and without exception, with a single question. And then what would I do? The business fails, and then what would I do? I would learn what went wrong. I would apply that learning. I would begin again with more information than I had the first time. The relationship ends, and then what would I do? I would grieve it properly. I would understand what I contributed. I would carry that understanding into the next chapter. The worst case lands, and then what would I do? I would survive it. I would grow from it. I would become, on the other side of it, someone more capable than the person who feared it. This is the practice. Not toxic positivity. Not the denial of genuine risk. But the disciplined insistence that every rehearsed worst case be followed by a rehearsed best response. Because the mind that knows what it will do if the worst happens is not the mind that is paralyzed by the possibility. It is the mind that moves. The habit of neglecting the fundamentals. This is the last habit. And I have saved it for last deliberately, because it is the one that underpins every other item on this list. The one that, when neglected, makes every other habit harder to kill and every other discipline harder to sustain. And it is the habit that is most frequently sacrificed on the altar of productivity, ambition, and the relentless modern pressure to do more, achieve more, optimize more. The fundamentals are not complicated. They are not secret. They are not the subject of a revolutionary new research paper or a cutting-edge biohacking protocol. They are sleep, movement, nutrition, genuine human connection, time in silence, time in nature. The basic, ancient, profoundly unsexy requirements of a body and mind that are being asked to perform at the level that an ambitious life requires. And we neglect them. Consistently. Creatively. With an inventiveness that would be genuinely impressive if the consequences weren't so serious. We stay up 2 hours past when our body is asking for sleep because there is one more thing to do. We eat in ways that are convenient rather than nourishing because we don't have time for anything else. We cancel the walk, the workout, the moment of stillness, because the schedule is full and these things feel optional in a way that the meeting does not. They are not optional. They are the infrastructure. A philosopher named Tund, not ancient, contemporary, someone I have followed for years, said something that has stayed with me with the persistence of a genuinely true thing. The person who neglects their body in pursuit of their goals will eventually find that the body becomes the goal, because a broken instrument cannot play the music. You are the instrument. Every habit on this list, the waiting, the consuming without creating, the outsourced self-worth, the reactive living, the avoidance, the catastrophizing, every single one of them is harder to kill when the instrument is depleted. When you are running on insufficient sleep, on a body that hasn't moved, on a nervous system that has not been given a single moment of genuine rest. And every single one of them becomes more manageable, not easy, but genuinely more manageable, when the fundamentals are in place. Sleep like it is serious. Because it is. Move like your clarity depends on it. Because it does. Eat in a way that fuels the life you are trying to build. Protect the relationships that restore you. Find the silence. Find the stillness. Find the moments of genuine, unproductive, wonderfully purposeless presence that remind your nervous system that you are a living being, not a productivity machine. This is not soft advice. This is the foundation without which everything else collapses. Tend the fundamentals. Every day. Without negotiation. The truth the world doesn't want you to know. We have named the habits. We have looked at them directly, honestly, without the comfortable padding of self-justification. And now I want to give you the truth that this entire conversation has been building toward. The world does not break you because it is cruel. The world breaks you because it is indifferent. It does not target you specifically. It does not conspire against your particular dreams. It simply operates, with the same energy. The world is not the problem. The habits are the problem. And here, right here, is the truth that changes everything. You are not your habits. But differently. Starting with one habit. The one that resonated most in this conversation. The one you felt in your body when it was named, that particular quality of recognition that is different from mere intellectual agreement. That felt sense of that one. That is the one that has been costing me. Start there. Kill that one first. And then watch what becomes possible in the space it leaves behind. Because here is what nobody tells you about killing a habit that has been breaking you. The energy it was consuming, the mental bandwidth, the emotional resources, the creative potential that was being quietly siphoned by the pattern, does not disappear when the habit dies. It becomes available. Available for the work you have been postponing. For the relationships you have been half present in. For the version of yourself you have been carrying around as a future promise for so long that you had almost stopped believing in it. That version is not far away. It is right here. Waiting, patiently, faithfully, without judgment, on the other side of the habits that have been standing between you and it. Kill the habits. Step through. The life that is waiting for you on the other side of this conversation is not a fantasy. It is the most honest, most grounded, most genuinely achievable version of what you came here to build. Go build it. If this conversation broke something open in you, if something named here gave language to a pattern you have been living but couldn't quite articulate, then you already know that this is not ordinary content. This is the Stoic path. And this is what we do here. Every single episode. We come to the real places. The honest, uncomfortable, life-altering places that most content skips over in favor of what is easy and palatable and forgettable. We do not do forgettable here. If you are ready for more of this, for the kind of deep, philosophically grounded, genuinely transformative conversation that actually changes how you think and how you live, then subscribe to the Stoic Path right now. Hit that button. Turn on your notifications. Share this with someone who is tired of being broken by the same things. Someone who is ready, even if they don't fully know it yet, to kill what has been killing their potential. Send it to them. No explanation needed. The title will say everything. This is the Stoic Path. And you, having sat with this truth, having looked at these habits with honest eyes, having chosen to be here until the very last word. You are already further along than you think.